The most important thing I learned personally in my journey was getting your blood work done regularly and staying on top of it, being accountable to the data so that you actually have a baseline and you can measure your own progress.
Welcome back to Unstoppable After 50. On this episode, I had the privilege of speaking with David Donnelly, the writer and director of the upcoming film Forever Young. This is a deep dive onto the topic of longevity. In Forever Young, David interviews scientists and doctors from around the world as they discuss the future of aging. So stay tuned for an eye-opening conversation with David Donnelly. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, listen, congratulations on your film. You're the first filmmaker I've interviewed, and congratulations on this really important work you did.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be your first filmmaker, and I'm glad you took the time to watch the film and have me on.
Yeah, well, you know, I've interviewed hundreds of authors, and I know what it takes to write a book, but, you know, writing and directing a 2-hour film is a whole other thing. I know it took you several years, at least 3 years, but I'd like to go back, David, and understand why did you even decide to, undertake this huge effort?
I think, like a lot of people, I just started to see a lot of information about this longevity stuff suddenly almost kind of come out of nowhere into my news feeds, advertisements. More people started to talk about it, but it was still, I think, at a lower level when we started making the film, which was now almost 5 years ago. And my initial question was just, how much of this is BS? As a filmmaker, that's what I was curious about. I wanted to know, like, okay, is this some sort of fad that's going to pass by and everyone's going to get excited about it? Then it's, a year later, it's going to be, the next thing that everyone's going to be obsessed about. And that was the starting point, is to figure out how much of this is real. Is this something is there real science that's backing this? And that kind of started the journey, just that initial question. And then 3.5 years later, we finished the film. We filmed all over the world. We filmed in the UK. We filmed in Japan. We filmed all over the United States. 88 minutes long, but yet we have more than 100 hours of footage that didn't make it into the film. So there was so much more that was uncovered. And I think a big hurdle was for us to figure out what to put in the film and what to leave out. And what to leave out is just as important as what you put in. So it was quite the journey to go through it. And I did, find out the answer to that question in the process.
Good, and we're going to talk about that. And before we do, I'd like to get sort of a virtual trailer, if you will. So I'm guessing a good part of my audience has not heard of the film yet. They're going to, obviously, today. Can you give a quick overview of the film and who you wrote and directed it for?
I wrote and directed it for anybody that, I guess, what we'll call longevity curious, people that might have heard about this and are looking for kind of a starting point for understanding what's actually going on, what's the science that's driving this, the hard science, not the pseudoscience, and what's next? Where are we going from this? It's also for people that might be very advanced into their journey and want to learn a little bit more from the top scientists. So it's really an exploration of the revolution that's happening, and it is a revolution, explaining how we got here, what's happening now, and where we're going. The second part of this is also the existential questions that it brings. With any kind of technological revolution, it changes our day-to-day lives. And this is no different. And we're already starting to see the impact of that. So there's a humanistic side to this. What does this mean for our day-to-day lives? What does this mean for our future? What does this mean for our children? And so that's also a big part of this. It's not just the science. It's also very much the philosophy, the societal impact, and the existential consequences that we're going to have to face as a result of this thing that's happening, and the challenges, and also the hope and the optimism behind it too.
Yeah, and that came through. I did watch the film. And before we kind of jump into the longevity side where I'm going to want to focus, can you go a little bit deeper on that side of the film and what you think it means for all of us?
If we look at it like this, for most of human history, there's been a pretty much basic three-act structure to what it means to be human. You've got your childhood, you've got your midlife, and then you've got old age. That's why we've got three-act plays. That's why we've got three-act stories. It's been a very basic three-act structure. Right now, the life expectancy is slowly increasing. But now we're getting to a point to where we're going to start seeing the impact of a lot of these advances as people are starting to age, especially this huge, baby boomer population that is now getting to, they're in retirement. And this is lasting a lot longer than anybody predicted. So that brings up a lot of important questions. What does it mean to retire? What does it mean to be in a relationship? Or do marriages last 70 years? What does it mean to have purpose and meaning? How do we find purpose and meaning when we're talking about all these technological advances, including artificial intelligence, including all these rapid changes that are occurring at the same time? And so those are the kind of deep questions that we have to have conversations about. And that's largely missing, I think, from the longevity conversation. Everyone's focused on the science, the latest breakthrough, the latest drugs, the treatments. But what we're not talking about is why do we have the highest rates of anxiety and depression of anywhere else in the world? And if we are living longer and we don't solve that problem, then what we're going to end up with is just a lot of really miserable older people. So that's not a good situation to be in as a society. So we also wanted to bring up that reality that the problem we have with loneliness and the inability of our demographic time bomb that's happening right now of an aging population without a younger labor force to take care of them. These are real problems. And we have to start talking about those and find solutions to those just as much as we do from the biological perspective.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to even hear you say that, because as soon as you say it, it's instantly obvious. You're right. I mean, all those things, relationships, workforce impact on the environment. There's so many things that you don't necessarily think about when you're thinking about longevity. But, it's something, even just the idea of marriage, right? I mean, I'm happily married. We're going to be 30 years this year.
Congratulations.
And, my wife and I are in good
amazing.
health. Well, and it's not like it hasn't had its issues, but of course, like anything, it's you work through it. But these are all things. I'm sitting here just thinking as you're talking, just how powerful and how important and how all that factors in. I just read something. Even you were talking about retirement. You should never retire from something. You should retire to something, right? And I thought, as soon as I read that, I was like, wow, yeah, it's spot on.
I'm gonna steal that and pretend that I thought of it myself. That's great. I like that. Retire to something.
Well, even this podcast is for me. Like, I'm in this phase where I'm starting to do that transition from working my butt off, and I'm like, I want to give back. I love talking to people like yourself. And the podcast is just my way of doing that. But
I think an interesting way to look at it is that we're living through a time where we're getting a fourth act of life. To go back to my idea of three acts versus, we're getting a kind of a bonus act, and we're not prepared for it because no one's training us on what to do with that extra time. And we schedule our entire lives, we design our entire lives, whether consciously or subconsciously, around how long we think we're going to live. There's an expectation of when we think we need to be successful, when we think we should be starting a family, when we think that we should be retiring. All of these things are based upon what is now becoming a misconception, because the biology is starting to change and the reality is catching up with us faster than the conversations we've had about it to prepare us for this. And if we don't start doing that, it's going to be disastrous.
Well, and the other thing that strikes me, David, is the importance, and the film obviously talks about it, but living till you're 80, 90, beyond is one thing, right? Then there's the whole health span. How are you living? And the quality of life. And, what, from the work that you've done on the film, from all the experts, and how many experts are on the film?
Well, we probably interviewed more than 50, but I think
Wow.
really there's about 10 that are kind of the core
Hmm.
people. And these are people that are very pragmatic scientists. They
Yep.
aren't the extremists.
Yep.
They aren't the immortalists. These are the people that are going to be in the history books for doing science that is sound and are making major breakthroughs about our understanding of aging and biology that most people probably don't know their names. They're not household
Yep.
names yet. I hope that changes.
Well, and just a quick note on that, I appreciated it, the fact that it wasn't like watching, and I love YouTube, and there's a lot of great people on YouTube doing some great content. But you're right. I'm going through your film like I've never heard of these people. But it was a refreshing difference in sort of the biohacking, just you know what I'm talking about, right? The much more pragmatic approach. What takeaways would you want to share? Now let's kind of refocus. Obviously, your film is for anybody. This podcast is geared for guys over 50 primarily, and guys that are typically interested in what we're talking about today. What takeaways? Well, actually, you mentioned the word misconception. Are there any misconceptions that you'd want to highlight specific to guys that you learned about during this film? Things that they may be doing today or have been doing that really is not right.
Sure. One of the mind-blowing things that I learned of many that really struck me is that the state of your relationships is what Dr. Sarah Centeno in the films calls the fifth vital sign. Especially as men, I think that we just don't look at it like that. But it's just as important as your heart rate, your blood pressure, your temperature. It is just as important. And the reason why the science is a little bit behind is because a lot of that is intangible. When you go to the doctors, they don't ask you, hey, how are your relationships and your social connectivity? They ask you, are you exercising? What are you eating? Are you smoking or not? They ask you, and those are important questions, but this one is just as important. And I think that's starting to change. We can see that it's starting to become kind of more acceptable to have that conversation, but I think we need to really prioritize that. It's just as important for our health, not for our longevity and for our health, not just for our not even just our mental health, not even just for our happiness or contentment or for our moods, for our longevity. There's a physiological loop that happens that when we're around other people, it works with, and Dr. Tom Lewis can explain this. He's a psychiatrist and neurologist, much better than I can. But we need other people to survive. We need to have that chemical exchange that occurs. There's a process called limbic resonance. And when limbic resonance happens, it's when two people are looking at each other, they're making eye contact in person, and it doesn't necessarily mean romantic. What it means is that you feel heard and you feel seen, and the other person does too. And this connection that happens, it creates a chemical exchange. And that chemical exchange is really important for our homeostasis. And that kind of stuff, I didn't realize how important that it was to our health. I mean, of course, I'm thinking, okay, well, that makes sense for being happy or having a successful relationship. But when you shift the paradigm and you reframe it as this is just as important as exercise and diet and sleep, then it makes you understand it has to be prioritized. You haven't seen your buddies in a long time. That's something that I go through regularly. It seems harder and harder to get your buddies together, to see them even once or twice a year. Everyone's got kids. Everyone's got demanding jobs. How do you make that happen? Well, if you start to prioritize it just as well as you do as going to the doctors or getting your physical or looking at your blood work, then it makes it more, you can justify it more of, hey, we have to get together every now and then. It's important to have these community aspects to your life to where you're engaging with other people.
Well, as a lifelong introvert, I find that a bit of a challenge.
I'm right there with you, man. That's why I'm saying it. It's probably the biggest challenge that I deal. I can deal with the diet and the exercise. I can deal with my blood work, but man, I'm just like you. I'm looking at footage all day. I like to read books. I'm very much, I spend a lot of time with my daughter. It's me going out, and that is rather challenging me for. So I'm in the same boat as you, but this has helped me realize that is something I need to work on, just like you need to work on your diet and exercise and everything else.
I'll tell you, Dave, I'm getting chill even hearing you say that, because again, I read a ton, right? This is what I do. And, I've been reading more and more about the importance of connections. And I'm always like, yeah, I get it. But to hear the way you just said it as sort of this, critical part. Yes, I get my blood work done twice a year. Yes, I work out every day. Yes, I do strength. All this, right? I try to eat right. Relationships. I was just talking to my wife this morning about getting together with another couple that we haven't seen in a couple months. I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll do that, whatever. But it is a critical reminder of how important that is. So I do appreciate that. And it kind of leads me to my next question. And maybe you'll have a different answer. But I wanted to hear, after all this that you've done on the film, traveling around the world, interviewing all these experts and scientists, what was something you personally started doing differently? I know you haven't hit 50 yet, but I'm sure there's been some impact above, even beyond the relationship part, that has made you say, wow, I need to start doing this.
I've changed how I exercise. I was I spent a lot of time playing sports when I was younger. And so I've always felt like, oh yeah, I'm going to the gym regularly or whatever. But you got to realize, I didn't realize just how different, just going to the gym is not this, it's what you do. It's not about how long you're there. It's not about, it's not just about how much you're throwing up, the weights. You have to look at it very much as, especially as you age, you have to take in consideration your recovery, mobility, working a lot of the parts of your body that you might not have understood were so important, especially when you were younger, mixing it up, challenging your body in new ways. I think that for me was really surprised me is Dr. Johnson, who's a retired surgeon, who's the producer of the film and also who stars in the film. I won't say his exact age, but he's almost twice as old as me. He'll kill me for saying that, but because he's not actually twice as old, but you get the idea. So when I go to California and I stay with him, we work out together in his garage with the personal trainer, and, he's doing a 3-minute plank at the end of his workouts. And I look at that and I'm thinking, okay, that, I would not think how important a plank is, a plank, and how he times it and but you've got the mental aspect to it, the discipline. You've also got the idea that's protecting his core, strengthen it. He's less likely to have falls, which at his age could cause damage, and it leads to mortality because of hip fractures and everything else, the cascade of events that happen if you have a fall. Strengthens his legs. Leg press is another one that is very important. So I just saw how he looks at it as functional and how everything has a purpose, and it's connected to long-term health versus, short-term muscle or aesthetics. The result is often that you're still going to look good if you do it that way. But that really inspired me to look at things a little bit differently and thinking, okay, well, am I designing my workouts for a way that is optimizing where I am in my life for what my body needs and for my functional day-to-day living and for my long-term health? And the answer is no, I was not. I wasn't giving it a thought. I was still working out like I was a 25-year-old. And you talk all about this, this stuff, very, very well. But that to me was, I think, a revelation. And just like everything else, you do it with deliberation. If you want to take it seriously, we understand how important exercise is, but all exercise is not created equal. So everything from a cool down period to stretching beforehand. When you're younger, you can kind of get away with it. But, as you age, all these things really start to matter. And so you do have to develop, I think, a protocol for yourself that you stick with. And if you look at it like life and death, as hey, this is going to add years to my life, more quality time to spend with my loved ones, then you're more likely to stick to it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, David, I've worked out my whole life, never super hardcore, but ever since high school, right? And I just recently turned 60, and it's been one of the biggest mental challenges, which is not trying to work out like I did when I was 20 or 30, and being okay with maybe going a little slower or a little lighter, or not, not being in the gym for 90 minutes or anything like that. So it's definitely an important shift, and you're still going to go through some variations. So stay tuned. Without going too personal, you mentioned your father. So I am a father of two daughters. My oldest just moved out this past week to New York City. Oy vey.
How you doing? How you doing about that?
Yeah. Just what I need, more stress.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about that happening to me. So I've got my daughter's 10, so I got time. Okay. But man, well, I don't think I'm prepared for that emotionally yet.
And trust me, well, even when they used to go away to college, that was a whole other animal. But we're empty nesters, and treasure the time. By the way, I always tell my young friends, like, treasure, it goes so fast. But I'm just wondering, with all the work that you've done now on Forever Young, is there anything you tell your daughter? I mean, is there anything that you're telling that next generation, or is she seeing it in your day to day?
Well, she's 10, so she's still quite young. But and actually, if you watch the movie, the little girl who is in the science fiction narrative, because we've got a narrative with actors and actresses that plays out, as you know, in the near future, she's the little girl. So she's an actress, and so she's actually in the film. But what I do tell her is we try to in the film, for example, she's reciting a line from Emily Dickinson about what makes life so sweet, which is a poem about pretty much life being short. We've heard this all the time. Life is short, whether it's, just do it, Nike, slow, all these different things. But I mean, you notice we don't hear that as much anymore because life is starting to get longer. And so there's not that same kind of, carpe diem mood of the 80s and 90s where you felt like it was everywhere. Like, seize the moment now, you got to. And so what I do try to tell her is just to be aware about how important every day is, which is a lot for a 10-year-old. At 10, they're already thinking every day is like that. So I don't think there's a lot that I'm conveying yet, but I think that she has seen the changes in my life. Like, I've transformed a lot in the last couple of years, physically, and I think also, I think in some ways spiritually, for my value system changing as a result of making this film. And so I think she is kind of looking at that and understanding that I've maybe have a different philosophy than I did previously. So I try to keep it light, but the main thing I think is making her realize that all these things that might seem like they're important really aren't important. Just like I think a lot of parents try to, tell their kids, but I don't think she's old enough yet to have, kind of the health. Her mom's very healthy, so she's got a very healthy habits, lifestyle. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think just establishing kind of a sense of a philosophy about just how lucky we are.
Yeah,
right,
I mean, it's a 10-year-old's only going to take it so far. But
exactly,
I think I've got to believe, even the fact that she participated in the film is, you're not going to even know probably for years the positive impact it's had, and even the positive impact of her seeing you and your wife, her mom, and how you guys are living your life. And it's important, right? That's one of the important things as parents, is to help our kids live healthy lives and hopefully not make some of the mistakes we've made. I can again recall going to my general doctor physician, and he kept saying, watch the carbs. I mean, this is 30 years ago. Watch your carbs, watch your sugar. I'm like, yeah. Well, it's important. I probably should have done a better job now that, I'm getting older and seeing some of the, results of maybe not making the best decisions back then. David, as we get ready to wrap up here, tell me a little bit more. I want to, share a little bit more about the film Forever Young. Guys are watching and listening to this. Who should, and I want you to share how to get it and where they can rent it and all that. But just, what's one last bit of encouragement? Why somebody should invest 88 minutes of their time into your film?
I think the landscape right now for how we get information is so polluted with junk. There's so much stuff out there that it's overwhelming and it's hard for us to sift through. who do we know who to trust? What should we believe and not believe? If somebody says there's a major breakthrough that's happening right now in the longevity space, like, okay, how do we know to trust them or not? There's a lot of mistrust in general, which a lot of it is well earned too, I'll say. But this film is not corporate sponsored. The producers are both doctors. There is a deliberate attempt the entire time to retain scientific integrity. So we're not selling supplements. We're not selling blood tests or treatments. We don't have some ulterior motive like almost all the biohackers are. We're just directly trying to take all of this information and break it down to where people can understand it. And ultimately, we want people to leave inspired, knowing that what's happening is real. This is a real scientific revolution that's occurring. We have a greater understanding of the biology of aging, and we're starting to be able to delay the onset. And eventually, there is a chance that we will be able to reverse it. We're not there yet, but the delayed onset is already happening. The treatments and stuff that's happening is on a daily basis. Artificial intelligence is like putting gasoline on that fire of knowledge and studies that are happening and papers that are coming out all the time. But I think what they need to know to watch this is that we took the time 3.5 years to go through all of this. So what they're seeing is a pragmatic approach that presents multiple sides of the argument and that ultimately doesn't have an agenda, but to inform and to inspire, to where we now know that we are living through a revolution. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's really what it comes down to. And that the fundamentals, the things that we were taught, diet, exercise, sleep, this kind of stuff, we've always known those were good things, right? But we didn't really understand how they impact our biology. And the reason why is because we didn't have biomarkers. It's Dr. Steve Horvath, who's in the film, creator of the Horvath Clock, he measured DNA methylation to figure out somebody's biological age. And that kind of sparked this revolution in biomarkers. Well, now we can actually start to see how this stuff is impacting us. And it's absolutely inspiring to know that your genes are not your destiny, that you can take action that can change your entire future. For most of us, of course, there's examples of people that are having, very terrible things happen that are out of their control. But for most people, you can take actions and create habits that will increase your longevity. And now we have the ability to measure how much that actually can transform our lives. And to me, that is to me the most inspiring thing that you could have, is that, there used to be this concept that, oh God, I've got bad genes. Now we know that, we can manipulate our health in ways that we never thought were possible for.
And where can they access the film?
Sure. So the film now, we will have a release this summer in 2026 across major platforms, Apple TV, Amazon, and Google and YouTube Play.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that'll be happening at some point this summer. I don't know the exact release dates yet, but our website is foreveryoung.film. People can go to the website and they can sign up to get notified when the film is out there. We also have a Substack that we've started because, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this, we have more than 100 hours of footage. It's amazing stuff about fundamentals and dozens of people that didn't make it into the film. And so we have this library of content that we've been building out to help people become informed, and they can dive as deep as they want to on our Substack. So whatever it is you're curious about, whether it's how to prevent dementia, which is a major concern. In fact, dementia has surpassed cancer for the number one thing that people are concerned about as they age, the biggest fear that they have. Atherosclerosis, which kills almost half of Americans. These are things we do deep dives into, and that we use the groundbreaking research to shift the framing that we have. And so we now almost have 100 articles on our Substack already. And there's also a link to, I think it's foreveryoungfilm.substack.com, but there's also a link to it on foreveryoung.film. But we're really getting amazing feedback from the Substack because it's clear that when people do experience the film at one of our screenings, you can now still do virtual screenings as well. Or we had a premiere, we're doing screenings still, a screening tour across the United States, that they want to learn more. So they watch the film and then it makes them curious about more. And so the Substack is the solution to that. They can dive as deep as they want to in any topic.
Well, David, listen, again, congratulations. And as someone who watched it, I can definitely attest it's worth everyone who's watching or listening to this conversation right now to make sure you check out and keep your eye out for it. David, as we get ready to wrap up here, I have what I call my Unstoppable After 50 trifecta. It's 3 quick questions, 3 quick answers. Sure. And the first one is, and this could be relative to the film, just your own personal experience. What do you think is one hard truth that we didn't discuss already that men after 50 need to hear?
Retirement isn't necessarily the best option for everybody. Or that we need to reframe what retirement means. Some variation of that. I'd say rethinking leisure, rethinking retirement. However you want to take that, but that is something that the science is showing us really needs to be thought about more seriously than I think a lot of people understand.
What do you think is one thing a lot of guys are probably doing right now that's, unfortunately wrecking their future?
Misallocation of leisure time, I think, is a big one. I like sports, for example. I think most men, like to watch sports, but if you calculate all the time that you might spend like just watching so much stuff, streaming stuff, or watching about sports or watching games, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, especially if it brings you some peace of mind. But if we look at it like we've got a limited amount of time, what could we be doing with the amount of time or money that we're spending on season tickets? Or I know that's not a popular opinion, but that is something that I believe in.
And finally, I call it my Unstoppable After 50 challenge. What's something you think guys can start doing literally this week, David, to help them remain unstoppable?
Planking. I'm serious. It's not
something easy like planking. Thank you.
Well, no. You start with 10 seconds and then you work your way up. But I think when people watch the film and they see that you've got a guy who's almost 80 years old who's doing this every day, it's inspiring. And then it makes you realize, it sucks at first, but there's a lot of payoff, not just for what it does for your core and for anti-inflammatory effects. It's also, by the way, got amazing cardio benefits. So people don't realize that. Planking is amazing for your cardiovascular system. So, not just for the physical aspect, but the mental strength and that comes from it as well. Putting on a timer and pushing yourself. That's a really great way to test yourself and to challenge yourself where it has quantifiable effects, where you can know, okay, and an improvement. There's going to be an arc that happens, quite quickly if you do it regularly.
Hey, David, thank you for your time today. Thank you for bringing this film to the world. I wish you the best of luck as it, reaches even a bigger audience. And just congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and wish you continued success. I love listening, and I'm sure as more people listen, they'll agree too.
Hey, I hope you found that conversation with David Donnelly interesting. And more importantly, I hope I've intrigued you enough to make sure you look for his film when it debuts later this summer. If the topic of longevity and health span interests you, by all means, check out Forever Young. And if you like what I'm doing here with Unstoppable After 50, please make sure you like and subscribe to the show. Go check out the YouTube channel. Appreciate you subscribing there. And also make sure you check out unstoppableafter50.com and sign up for my weekly playbook. Every week I send a recap to my group of men who've asked for it, a PDF that's designed to be printed and saved, and it's a recap of that previous week's episode. So check out unstoppableafter50.com.